we're rolling.
Hello, everybody. This is Robert Anthony Siegel, and it is my great pleasure today to act as interlocutor for Sean Murphy, who is getting a taste of his own medicine. And I am going to give him the 14:55 interview, which, as you know, is 14 minutes and 55 seconds long. I'll be timing it, and consists of ideally 15 questions. Not everybody makes it to the end. I'm not sure when I did it, I'm not sure I got past question 3. But we're going to try and make it. Sean is this sort of a unicorn-like figure for me. A writer, a terrific writer, a denizen of the writing world, somebody who loves art, clearly loves people, has this sort of great idealism in him, and nevertheless is capable of running an arts organization, right? And can think in terms of lists and systems and structures and making ends meet. It's a very unusual combination of skills, very rare in the writing world, which can sometimes feel like the island of lost toys, and it has its charms, it really does. But nevertheless, it's rare to find somebody who can lead the pack towards a goal and actually achieve that goal. And Sean, you are incredibly valuable for that reason. And 14:55 is an extraordinary organization also for that reason. Something we need more and more as I think times get tougher and the world gets more confusing. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Well, that's as usual for you, Robert. It's very generous, very kind, and very appreciated. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and the check is in the mail.
Not generous at all, just true, actually. But, we so often say what's so obviously true. So I'm glad to have a chance.
Well, and I'd love you to, so this was your idea too, which I thought was a great idea. So that's why this is happening. But you can maybe tee it up with, you had when we were doing your interview and you basically said what you said.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I mean, you run this organization. People should know you and know sort of the sensibility behind the curtain, so to speak, as you pull the levers.
And you bravely volunteered yourself to do the questioning, and I said, sure.
Oh yeah, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, I guess.
Fair enough. And I wrote the questions, so if I can't answer these, that's really sad. So I'm excited. I'm ready to chat.
Okay, good. So I'm going to start the clock. 14 minutes 55. That's confirmed.
Yep.
No heat here. And go. Okay, time is running. Question number 1, right? The first book that made you want to be a writer, or what book changed your life?
So a little bit of both. And of course, there are myriad examples. I think you and I mentioned this one question most writers could spend hours lovingly talking about. But for me, it really is pretty simple. There's a book called The High King by Lloyd Alexander. It's the 5th and final book of a series that is fantasy, young adult. It won the Newbery Award in 1967. And it concerns a young, soon-to-be king hero. But as the series follows him as he grows up, and the final story brings everything together. And looking back decades later, it's astonishing. In 5 relatively brief books, this whole world is conjured with all these characters. And so it was one of the first books I encountered before 6th grade. So it was that magical age where I was old enough to really get a little bit more advanced or ambitious reading, but I was still young enough where the world, hasn't beaten us down and there's no cynicism. And so you can really explored these worlds, but it awakened, it was that real experience of the magic of writing where you're visualizing entirely other worlds, but seeing people you know and love in them. And it has staying power. Like have a strong nostalgic streak, but I can still read passages from that book today and get choked up. So very powerful stuff. And the guy, it's like it's derived from Welsh history. So you assume this guy is like from the UK, and he lived in Pittsburgh, lived in Pennsylvania. So amazing.
Oh, interesting. You're totally right. That moment before middle school is just that there's a kind of openness that is hard to replicate later in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a magical inflection point.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing great. Let's go on. Your most profound artistic influence.
So another one, right? You got all day. Impossible question to answer, but still pretty easy. For me, it usually comes back to one of my heroes, Charles Mingus. Arguably one of the most important, influential, brilliant composers, jazz musician, bassists of the 20th century. But in addition to creating this entire universe in music, all of which seems to be at once confrontational, ebullient, full of passion and pain. But this guy never caught a break. A, didn't have money, and B, was an African American at a time when African Americans were second-class citizens, even, and if not especially, the geniuses amongst us. So this guy knew he was a genius, and had to struggle for everything. And the kind of thing, as certainly as a white male, I just can't even fathom being that talented, but also the setbacks and the indignities. And he just refused to be beaten, and he willed himself to be, an important figure. And I wrote a long tribute to him. I'm just going to read a little paragraph from that. I think it sums him up. Charles Mingus was, above all things, a fighter. Since nothing came easily to him, his struggles as a musician and a man acted as the kiln in which his character was forged. This is how Mingus, mercurial and larger than life, manages to encapsulate so many aspects of the American story. He battled to find his artistic voice, then he strived, often stymied by rejection or indifference, to have that voice heard. Eventually, inevitably, he managed to create material too brilliant to be ignored. And I think that certainly is an inspiration for any artist.
That's beautiful. I love Mingus too. Actually, I'm going to hit pause because I have a selfish story to tell.
Please.
My dad was a lawyer, and he actually had a moment with Mingus. He was walking through the courts, and there was this big guy who was sort of having like a meltdown. Yeah. And my father said to him, I must have been a little kid. And he told it to me years later. He went up to him and said, "What's the problem?" And he said, they were outside landlord-tenant court. He said, "I'm being evicted, and my lawyer hasn't showed up, and now I don't know what to do." And my father said, "That's okay, I'll do it for you. I'll go in there." So he actually represented him on that court date. And he didn't know anything about jazz, my father. But he was like, he got his name, and he said, "Oh, you're a jazz musician." And then I got the story years later. But it was just this interesting moment. Yeah, he was always pushed to the edge, never got any of the support a great artist should get.
Yeah, and I think, frankly, that it's a very American phenomenon that we ignore or hamper the iconoclasts amongst us, and then typically lionize them later. So there's like a double tragedy. Eventually, the brilliance rises to the top, I think. So it's not tragic, but I think there's a very American psychosis where we're just not able to handle people that break the mold, but then we come to appreciate them later.
Yeah, which is why so many jazz players ended up in France, where they could actually get some support.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, I am starting the clock up again.
Okay.
All right, time is running.
Let's do it.
A beautiful answer. So, Number 3, album or movie you recommend without reservation.
I'll do one of each. Speaking of jazz, again, anyone that knows me, I'm obsessed with music, but if you have not lived, if you've not absorbed John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, it's just the consummate piece of art, and it's ceaselessly rejuvenating. And for movie, another impossible one, but a movie that changes me every time I see it is Walkabout by Nicholas Reg. Please see that if you haven't seen it. It'll change your life.
Yeah, I saw it when it came out. I was actually a little boy.
Mm-hmm.
It scared the pants off of me. It was a very harsh movie.
Yes.
But very beautiful.
Very beautiful. Very beautiful.
Yeah. And A Love Supreme is just, it's gorgeous. It can't be contained.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, beautiful, beautiful choices. Best first or last line in any book ever. I know that's an easy one.
Yeah, right. So that's another one we could have hours, and we should have like a special series dedicated to that question and discussing it. But again, out of the many, many choices, and it's overused, but I think the last line of The Great Gatsby is so masterful, not only as a novel and an ending and tying up all the themes of the novel. I think it ties up everything about America. It ties up everything about nostalgia. It's everything. So just that last line. So we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. What better summation of a life, of why we write and bear witness? And it's this most graceful use of language. It's the truest sentence I can think of.
It is gorgeous. I remember you feel like the top of your head has been removed and you're now connected. Your brain is directly connected up into the cosmos.
Yes, I love that. Yep.
Yeah, that is a great line. Okay, now we're getting personal.
Yeah.
Number 6, why have you not read Moby Dick?
So, of course, I've read it. It's my favorite book. I return to it often. I've written about it. I will continue to write about it. And the reason I selfishly have that in this query is because I'm usually astonished at how many writers have not read that. And if people read it and don't like it, I respect that. But it's one of my missions in life is to demystify what is a joyful, lovable book full of so ahead of its time, so full of life and love. And for people to buy into the stereotype and not give it a shot is unfortunate.
I agree. It's a book that's fascinated me too for years. I read it sort of on a sort of repeating loop, but I never quite get to the beginning or the end. I sort of take little pieces of it, and it feels like the product of a madman, but in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great. Somehow it says something profound about you, Sean, that you are a Moby Dick fan.
It says something.
Yeah, well, you don't find that very often now. That's a small club, I think.
A shrinking club.
Is there a single theme or issue your work addresses? This is very hard.
Yeah, it's very difficult because it's so tough to not sound pretentious, but it's certainly in my nonfiction. I've written a lot of criticism, a lot of movie, book, and music reviews. And one of the passions that I have, and I think what really turned me on to nonfiction writing as a form after grad school, was this real compulsion to celebrate underrepresented or unheralded artists. Certainly celebrating heralded artists and talking about why masterpieces work and why they're important. But there's something special about, and that's certainly my proclivity for jazz music, taking figures that haven't gotten enough ink and giving them their due. There seems to be something really meaningful about that. So I look back on a lot of the essays I've written, and I think they have a shelf life only because, they're not trying to be contemporary or, popular. They're really trying to grapple with why some of these people should be heard or read or seen.
Do you have a recommendation for us? maybe a jazz musician who doesn't get the attention he should?
Wow. I mean, so many, but a couple that jump out. Booker Little was a trumpet player and was robbed. His life was defrauded. He had a rare liver disease, didn't do drugs or drink, died at 23, and still managed to leave behind a couple of masterful albums that are as emotionally affecting as anything Beethoven did. So I would implore anyone to check out Booker Little. He's a definite hero.
I've heard the name, but I don't think I've heard the music.
We'll have to talk about that at some point. I'll get listen, and then we'll rap about it.
Good. What's your writing routine?
So, I envy writers that either have the discipline or the luxury of having a specific routine. My routine is very consistent with what a lot of other people I've talked to about this have said is in our increasingly chaotic world with information overload and all of us doing 100 jobs and raising kids, and you write when you can. But I think for me, it's both. It's a desire, but it's always a reminder that it's a discipline, and you have to have discipline. So I'm ceaselessly disgusted with myself for how little I read and write, considering how much I love both endeavors. But the routine is just make it a part of your life and force it to be a part of your life any way you can.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. It's a particular kind of discipline that can navigate chaos successfully without resorting to rigidity, because none of us can afford that option.
Yeah.
You can't say at 9 I will be at my desk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very true. Do you believe in writer's block?
I think I'm going to plagiarize. You may have said this or someone else, but they put it perfectly because I agree too, that writers can be blocked. I don't think that there's, this imp that comes in and, paralyzes you. And I think, so I ultimately would say I don't believe in it only because I think if you start writing, it's a reminder, and I'll just speak for myself, but I'm pleasantly surprised and dismayed at how often I need to remind myself, like, it's always bad when it comes out, or it's often bad. You've got to get it down, and then the revision comes in, and sometimes inspiration comes once you get going. So I think anyone that's truly blocked is probably purposefully avoiding something. But if you want to write and you've got the time, you can do it. Doesn't mean you're going to do it well, but you got to try.
Yeah. You're right. I keep wondering who's responsible for this this magical falsity, this idea that people sit down and just type it out. I think it's Hollywood. I think it's the movies.
I think I wrote somewhere, Robert, the reason that writers are portrayed the way they are in movies isn't because they're trying to romanticize it so much as if they were true to life, they'd show people sitting around in their underwear, unshaved, bitter and sweating and angry. And it's like, no one needs to see that. I know if there was a hidden camera on me when I'm writing, it would be alternately boring and repulsive. So you need to have the tweed coat and the pipe. But yeah, it's farcical how writers are portrayed in movies.
There's a period in John Cheever's, the short story writer, John Cheever's life, when he was living in an apartment building in New York City. He would get dressed up in his 3-piece suit, right? Get in the elevator at 8 a.m. when everybody was going to work, go down to his office which was in the basement of the building. They had given him a little space he could use. Take off the suit because it was hot down there, right? And write all day in his underwear, and then put it back on to go upstairs.
Brilliant. I've read that. I love it. And I've definitely read about writers that will get on the subway and, go somewhere to be in an office or, get out of the routine. And I think that's something we're all learning right now with our virtual reality, so to speak, that we do need to find ways to break out of maybe more comfortable habits that keep us from being productive.
Yeah, true. Talk about the most significant challenge, artistic or otherwise, that you have faced in your life.
So, of course, there's too many to count there too. The life of a writer is typically fraught with rejection and fear. But I was very, very fortunate to have Pat Conroy, rest in peace, see a section of my first novel, which is still unpublished 20 years later. And he liked it and called me and said, I want to give you a blurb. I want to connect you with my agent. And he did those things. He followed through, and the agent saw a section and loved it. And I thought, I think I was 30, like, it's it. This is how it happens. This is magic. And over the course of a long summer, it ended up, not being commercially viable. But that novel has been agented twice. I've had excerpts published. One of the excerpts was nominated for a Pushcart, but it's become a touchstone in my life because it's not meant to be published somehow, and I'm okay with that because on one hand, of course, that rejection forced me to continue writing other things, and if I had success or published that, I think I had the drive and the dedication to continue writing at that age. But if that had been published, perhaps I would have been on a different trajectory. So I look back on the last 2 decades and am weirdly grateful for that. But I say without deliberate self-deprecation, I think it's a good piece of work. There's something about it that is just not meant to be yet. And maybe it will at one point. But dealing with that and trying to come out of that in a positive way, again, is something that's every writer deals with. But that was tough to be on the cusp of what I thought might be meaningful publication and realize, like, you got to keep trying and you might have to try with other stuff.
Wow, that's such an interesting story. It's really for a longer conversation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of people do a first novel that has strengths, but ultimately isn't publishable or isn't published. But it sounds like that your novel is a little different because it got this interest. You've used pieces.
Well, and you know what? I've never thought about this, Robert, because it is very pretentious and self-serving. I've actually never really made this connection, but it very, very loosely is an homage to Moby Dick. It doesn't have anything, no whales. It takes place in the restaurant industry, but I use this restaurant the way Melville used the ship to bring all these characters together. But maybe I cursed myself by having both the audacity and the arrogance to invoke Moby Dick, which no one's read anyway. So,
but Moby Dick ruined Melville. Up to that point, he had written a couple of sort of potboilers.
That's right.
They were just like popular seafaring tales, and he had made a little money and gotten a lot of notice, and Moby Dick destroyed his career.
100% true. And in fact, here's how deep I go. I have a theory that Hawthorne, famously disdained it and didn't care for it, and that hurt Melville tremendously. I genuinely believe that Hawthorne recognized the genius and was jealous and couldn't bring himself to vouch for it. Whether that's true or not, I genuinely believe. I do not believe that Hawthorne read that book and said, "Eh." I think he read it and said, "This is outpacing my own brilliant work."
And what supports your view is the fact that they were college roommates, and we know how sort of fraught or complicated those relationships are.
Yep, for sure.
So I got to admit that the buzzer went off.
Oh, okay.
But I feel like I've been using some of your time, wasting some of your time.
Not at all.
So I want to ask you, I feel like you deserve 2 more questions.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, we make the rules, right?
Yeah. Define or explain what literary success means to you. It's a natural progression from what you were just saying.
Yeah, and again, I this also I think can border on pretension, but it's very genuine, and I think most writers would agree. I think you get to a certain point, maybe some earlier than others, but I think when you arrive at a point where you've been doing it long enough, you begin to recognize, and this is true whether it's an essay, or a book review, or a novel, or a poem, you're writing ultimately to satisfy some urge, some curiosity, something you're trying to discover about yourself. But if you become your own harshest critic, by the time you let it into the world, you've satisfied something. just like you won't let it into the world if you know it's not ready or right. So the satisfaction that comes from a job well done, where you genuinely believe, like, I got it. I did what I set out to do, or I transcended, what I initially thought was going to be this, and it became this, and discovered something and wrote something original and have somehow developed a style. That's a satisfaction that even though I haven't had the fame and fortune, I don't think the fame and fortune would approximate that feeling of deep satisfaction, that spiritual sense of, it's not measured by dollars and likes and, the rank on the bestseller list. Those things were very worthy and worth trying to attain. But I think a lot of writers that aren't happy, and they tend to, be more genre type writers, if you're writing from a place of cynicism or with commercial aspirations, you've already kind of lost the game, which isn't to say those people aren't very happy. But for me, and it could be a profound rationalization for, being ill-read, but I think that genuinely, like, if you're not loving what you're doing, you're not loving it on some spiritual level, you're always going to be dissatisfied.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Okay, here's the last question.
Okay.
You deserve it. 1 minute exhortation for a beginning writer looking for advice.
So yeah, right. Failure, rejection, fear, doubt, uncertainty are all part of the process. So for any young writer, I'd say, I wish every artist all the best, because that lifts all boats and we're not competing with each other. But very few of us are going to be fortunate enough to right out of the gate be either successful or wealthy. But don't let the rejection or the misunderstandings or any of the kind of realities define you. You build a career by doing the work, and just probably like with any endeavor, I would think with athletes, with any serious endeavor, you get to a certain point, you're not putting that kind of time into something. If you're not enjoying it and you don't believe in it, you will stop doing it. So I think the tragedy is the writers with genuine talent that quit. The ones that don't have talent or aren't meant to be writers, that's the necessary attrition. Those are the pretenders. But for people that really feel good about what you're doing and that you're trying to create something beautiful, that's its own reward. And it can be a way of really saving your life.
Great advice. But we're not ending there.
Okay.
Now, let's remove your writer's hat and put on your 1455, great leader hat. Is there anything you would like to say as the head of 1455, an arts, a new arts organization dedicated to literature, to end us here?
That's a beautiful question, Robert, and I appreciate the opportunity. So I would say that's another one I could, and if someone is really discovering us for the first time, there's a lot of thoughts on the website. But really, to me, what I found lacking in my own life was this sense of community and solidarity, even with Facebook, which I think on balance, for adults anyway, I think on balance, being able to keep up with your friends, being able to interact with people is, if you use it for the positive ways it can be used, that's a very affirming thing. All the other stuff can be very time-sucking and soulless. But what I found as someone that really loved grad school but ultimately didn't get a PhD, I found that I really missed that stimulation and that just the ability to converse with other people that are passionate. And when I went to the Noepe Center at Martha's Vineyard, obligatory shout out to my good friend Justin Aaron, he created this writer's retreat. And it was the first time in decades that I had been around for a sustained period of time other writers who were serious about this. And what I invariably found is these types of people are sensitive, generous, talented, giving, and inspiring. So for me, this became that kind of cliche of, you write the story you want to see in the world, you create the reality you want to have. That's really the mission of 1455 in a nutshell. Is very selfish. It's trying to create this environment that supports and celebrates what writers are doing, because writers themselves recognize how difficult and lonely and often unrewarding the work is. For all the reasons we've talked about, it's super rewarding and spiritually enriching. But the reality is it's a very solitary endeavor. And there isn't a surplus of support. I'm not even talking about financial, forget that. But just the loving community, and what I've loved about what I've seen, the writers that really inspire me are ones that are part of the literary community, both the literal, but the figurative, like the literary community. And anything we can do to support and shine light on each other's work, that should be its own reward. It's its own kind of uplifting mission. But to try to really create something, which I think and I will say we are trying to do with this endeavor, is going to help writers feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And I think what could be more important, and what better use of resources and energy than to try to create that.
Mm, mm. Well, there's a beautiful nobility to that. Thank you, Sean. It's been such a pleasure hearing you.
Well, likewise, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I think we came up with an idea for a whole other series, right? Like writers talking about the first lines, and there's a lot of meat to chew on this bone, which is also, it's probably a good note to end on. I mean, I think that's the other thing for people like us. This is, better than drugs. And this is what makes us tick, talking about and celebrating the work that's inspired us. And I think there is something deeply enriching about getting geeked out on talking about music and movies and books, because that's aside from the real, the intimacy of community and the spiritual aspect of that, celebrating art. What better way would you want to spend your time? And the more we can do that, the better, especially in these times.
I think a first line series would be great. I also think a favorite song series would be terrific.
Amazing. Yeah. All right. Get on that. We'll work on that. To be continued. Let's put it that way.
Continued, exactly.
On many levels. Well, Robert, thank you so much. I appreciate it. As always, you are the ultimate generous host. Your kindness and affability always shine through.
It was such a pleasure.
I didn't feel like I was in the hot seat at all.
Oh, well, maybe we need to redo this.
Too late.
Yeah. Great.
All right. See you guys next time.